Okay, I hope all of you had a nice weekend. Your assignment was to read 40 pages in your textbooks before today's lecture. I'm going to review 2 studies on incentives and decision making that are mentioned in the reading. The first study that we're going to look at is the famous Stanford University marshmallow experiment. Psychologist Walter Mischel conducted this study in the 1970s, and it really gave us a lot of insight into how people react to incentives when they're making decisions. So, in this experiment, Dr. Mischel studied a group of children who were all aged 4 to 6. He offered them the following deal. They were each offered their choice of a treat. This was either a marshmallow, a pretzel, or a cookie. They could each eat one piece of the treat they chose now, or wait for 15 minutes and consequently get 3 pieces. So the children had a strong incentive to wait. And here's what happened. During the experiment, a few children ate the treat immediately. But some of the children turned their backs or covered their eyes with their hands, trying to inhibit their desire to eat the treat. Some children even kicked the table where the treat was. After about 3 minutes, the patience of about half the children completely eroded and they ate the one treat. For the other children, the incentive, the 3 treats, was sufficient enough to keep them waiting for the full 15 minutes. Now, this study showed us 2 things. First, many of the kids who waited for the 3 treats were older. This is partly because the frontal lobe of the brain is less developed in younger children. That's the part of the brain that makes short-term decisions and considers the consequences of different choices. As a result, it was harder for the younger children to consider the long-term consequences of their actions. However, as we get older, the frontal lobe inhibits our desire for immediate enjoyment and helps us make long-term decisions. The second thing the study showed us is really interesting. Age is not the only factor. Years after the original tests, Dr. Mischel found that there were distinct differences between the individuals who had waited and those who hadn't waited when they were children. For example, the individuals who had waited had higher test scores in school and were, in general, more successful in life as adults. The individuals who had eaten the one treat right away reported having behavioral problems in school later and weren't as successful. So later, Dr. Mischel did a brain scan on the research subjects who were now adults. He found distinct differences in brain activity between the 2 groups. Among many of those who as children had waited for the 3 treats, the frontal lobe of the adult brain was more active. But among those who had not waited, the frontal lobe was less active in the adult. So it appears that the ability to consider possible consequences also depends in part on the individual person. Similar studies have been implemented all over the world with similar results. In 2003, the BBC and Open University got together in order to implement their own marshmallow experiment. Let's take a look.